Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, and fair warning well in advance, today's video is going to be a bit of a slow burner, hence the title. There's not going to be much in the way of seat-of-the-pants, death-defying, rip-roaring, butt-clenching action in this battle, and when you see the situation that WoW's CC-57, more on that name later, but when you see the situation that he finds himself in, you'll understand why. Basically, if he'd elected to go in all guns blazing, he would have died, and you wouldn't be watching this battle at all. Nevertheless, it is a kind of a slow battle, so the perfect World of Warships battle to watch while you're waiting for Red Dead Redemption 2 to install on PC. And I do recommend you take the opportunity to make yourself comfortable, perhaps go and get yourself a nice hot drink. It's okay, go on, we'll wait. I mean, I'm not actually going to sit here and wait 2 minutes. I'm kind of expecting you to have paused the video, go away, make yourself some tea or coffee or whatever, and come back and then, press play again. But I know what you lot are like. There's going to be somebody out there, in fact, now that I've actually made the mistake of mentioning it, there's going to be dozens of you out there who are actually going to complain that I didn't wait when I promised that I was going to wait while you went and made yourself a hot drink. Well, tough shit. My channel, my rules. I don't know. People just want the moon on a stick these days. Right, anyway. First contact spotted. Oh, I should probably mention what ship WoW's CC-57 is in. This is the USS Benham. It's an extremely un-American American destroyer. And when I say un-American, I don't just mean it believes in free universal healthcare. It's got a lot of torpedoes. I mean, a lot of torpedoes. 2 launchers on each side, each launcher capable of firing off 4 torpedoes. Yeah, that's right, 16 torpedoes almost at once. And that's not all. With the right equipment and commander skills, you can get that reload down to 65 seconds. Which means that you can have a second salvo of 16 torpedoes in the water while the first set of 16 torpedoes are still running. They have a speed of 65 knots and a range of 10.5 kilometers, and while these torpedoes don't hit quite as hard as equivalent tier Japanese torpedoes, for example, but when you have anything up to 32 of these things in the water at the same time, little details like relatively low average damage per hit don't really matter. As Stalin himself once said, quantity has a quality all of its own. It's not all great news with this ship, of course. The torpedoes are definitely the best feature, which is very unusual for an American destroyer. It has your typical American 5-inch guns, but it only has 4 of them. The speed is mediocre, as is the stealth, and its anti-aircraft firepower is downright bad. Although if you're prepared to give up the engine boost consumable, and I wouldn't recommend it, you can replace it with the defensive fire anti-aircraft consumable, although you're really just slapping a band-aid on something that's not particularly good to begin with, and I wouldn't really recommend it. This, by the way, is a fight that the Benham should already have lost. He's managed to get 4 or 5 salvos away at that Fletcher before the Fletcher even begins to pay attention to it. The Fletcher finally wakes up, slows, pops his smoke screen, and of course, because the Fletcher was the one spotting WoW CC-57, he's no longer detected. And even though none of those torpedoes are going to hit the Fletcher, some of them came bloody close. It doesn't really matter, because the tubes are reloaded. There's another 8 torpedoes on the way. I think it's probably time to address the elephant in the room. WoW's CC-57 is the account on the Russian server. This game is being played on the Russian server. That was given to one of the World of Warships community contributors, hence the name of the account. Wargaming's new procedure with community contributors is that they give us anonymous test accounts, and those test accounts are all located on the Russian server. As a community contributor with test ships granted to you on your own account, it can be difficult to get any kind of meaningful testing in, because it's not completely unknown for people to target community contributors specifically because of who they are. I mean, at this point, the only thing that anybody would know was that this is a community contributor. But there are, I think, 200 of us, so it could be anybody. WoW CC-57 here has just managed to stray within detection range of that Musashi. Now, he's dumping the torpedoes in the water anyway, even though it's, well, it's double difficult because the Musashi is nose in towards him, so he's at the best possible angle to dodge torpedoes, and also he now knows that there are torpedoes coming. And despite the sheer volume of torpedoes that were dumped into the water, under those kind of circumstances, you're probably going to be lucky to get more than 2 or possibly 3 torpedo hits. And in fact, that's what he gets. The amusing thing here, though, is despite the fact that he's been radared by the Buffalo and is being targeted, and the Musashi, who just ate 3 of those torpedoes, has spotted all of them, more of the torpedoes strike the ships behind the Musashi in the lead. What's their excuse? How did they not know the torpedoes were coming? At this point, it's probably worth pointing out the situation that WoW CC57 finds himself in. Right now, there's just him and an extremely over-optimistic Bismarck on this side of the map, fighting against what could be up to 7 enemy ships. Which means that the other 10 members of his team are actually losing the fight against the remaining 5 ships on the enemy team. But hey, when has that ever been surprising? The thing is, he's probably in the single best ship that he could be for the situation that he's found himself in. Basically, he's conducting a fighting withdrawal. If he was trying to do this in a battleship or a cruiser, he'd probably already be dead. But he's doing it in a destroyer, which means he's got the stealth advantage, and he's doing it in a destroyer that's capable of putting 32 torpedoes into the water at the same time. If you have a look at the map, there are 2 very obvious and relatively narrow choke points that all of those battleships, the biggest, fattest and juiciest torpedo targets that there are, 2 choke points that all of those battleships have to sail through in order to continue the pursuit. Now, this would be a good situation to be in any torpedo destroyer, but I feel that the Benham in particular profits the most from exactly this kind of circumstance. Let's say he was in a Shimakaze, for example, which would absolutely be able to wreak havoc on battleships passing through a choke point like that, but it wouldn't be able to do it very often. The Shimakaze, for example, with the 12km range Type 93 Mod 3 torpedoes, those torpedoes hit hard, and it can put 15 of them in the water at once, but then it has to wait more than 2 minutes before it can do it again. Each of the Benham's torpedoes may be only doing 65% of the damage of one of the Shimakaze's torpedoes, but there are more than twice as many of them, and they're coming twice as quickly. In fact, the Benham fires off its torpedoes and reloads its torpedoes so quickly that you can even afford to fire off some torpedoes just in case. Like, I don't see anything down there, but there might be something down there, so just in case, I'll fire some torpedoes. You've got plenty to spare, and even if there's nothing there, the tube's going to be reloaded again in just over a minute. And yet, despite the obvious advantages that WoW CC57 is enjoying against that horde of mostly enemy battleships down there, this rampage of his could have been brought to a halt by the enemy team at just about any time, and there are 3 different ways they could have done it. First, let's talk about the Fletcher. It's got more health, it's got more guns, it's got better stealth, so it should always be able to get the first shot off. And while both ships have the same speed, the Fletcher doesn't have to manoeuvre from side to side to fire off torpedoes, so should easily have been able to catch up. But he's chosen to do none of those things, which is why all of those battleships in general, and that Musashi in particular, were probably very upset with him, and is almost certainly what led to that deliberate team killing. Now, I'm certainly not condoning team killing. It's very difficult to think of a situation where it's justified, but that was pretty much a textbook example of somebody who really was no use to the team alive. Speaking of somebody who's not any use to the team alive, let's look at the second way in which WoW CC57's rampage could very easily have been brought to a dramatic and early end. The enemy carrier. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, while I was enumerating the Benham's good points and bad points, one of the Benham's bad points is its thoroughly mediocre anti-aircraft firepower, even with access to the defensive AA consumable, which WoW's CC57 has not taken. Which basically means that with his arse hanging out in the breeze all the way out on the flank like this, he is a complete sitting duck for any carrier aircraft attacks. And the carrier wouldn't even have to sink him, just spotting him would be enough. The majority of fatalities to destroyers caused by carriers are caused indirectly. It's the spotting that gets the destroyers killed, and there's no shortage of ships down there very, very eager to shoot at this destroyer. So what exactly is the enemy Enterprise doing that's so important he's given up the opportunity to get an easy kill on the easiest target in this battle for his aircraft, and which his team probably most needs spotting and sinking? He's sending his aircraft against the Alaska, the Tier 9 premium cruiser that by a remarkable coincidence also happens to be the Tier 9 cruiser that has the highest overall anti-aircraft damage per second. So, much like the Fletcher, the enemy Enterprise isn't really much use to his team alive either. And that brings us on to the third and final way, and it looks like he's just woken up, because he has managed to radar WoW CC-57. Yes, of course, I'm talking about the one enemy cruiser on this side of the map, the Buffalo. The Buffalo, American Tier 9 heavy cruiser. I think it's a heavy cruiser. Is it a heavy cruiser? Yes, it's a heavy cruiser. I had to think there for a second. More importantly, it also comes with radar and hydro. And much like his unfortunate teammate in the Fletcher, I find myself asking the question, just what the hell has that Buffalo been afraid of? Why has he spent this entire game hiding behind the battleships when they need his hydro and his radar to help them do something about this bloody Benham, who's been nothing but a thorn in their sides? Actually, he's been significantly more of a problem than a thorn in their sides for the entire duration of this match. He's done 250,000 damage so far to this collection of enemy battleships. He's single-handedly blocked the advance of more than half the enemy team for this whole battle. And they could have stopped him at any time. The Fletcher could have done it, chose not to. The Enterprise could have done it, chose not to. The Buffalo could still do it, but he's choosing not to. I know the Buffalo isn't as fast as the Benham, but the Benham is sailing around in circles and in zigzags. That 3.5 knot speed advantage is irrelevant when you're pulling these kind of maneuvers. The Buffalo could easily catch up. What exactly is he worried about? What does he think is going to happen if he finds the Benham? Is he frightened of getting torpedoed because he's seen what's happening to the battleships? Well, you've got hydro. I mean, this is happening to the battleships because you're not chasing the Benham down. You've got radar, you can spot him from 10 kilometers. You've got hydro, you can detect his torpedoes coming. And while he's pulling these kind of maneuvers, sailing around in circles and zigzagging and slowing down, you can easily catch him. But the Buffalo, well, I don't know what the Buffalo's doing, but it's nothing useful. It's probably also worth pointing out, and this probably isn't going to strike any of you as remotely surprising, but despite the fact that WoW CC-57 has, for the overwhelming majority of this match, single-handedly been fighting off more than half of the enemy team, his team still only have a 1 kill advantage over the enemy. It kind of leaves you wondering just how badly must the rest of his team suck if he is single-handedly taken on more than half of the enemy for them, and they're still barely managing to win. Oh look, there's 320,000 damage, and more. There's a flood as well on the Tirpitz. Sorry, not the Tirpitz, the Vanguard. He's already sunk the Tirpitz. What am I talking about? That guy's probably been hit by so many torpedoes. Oh, is he going to get the Buffalo? Oh, I think he is. It didn't look like the Buffalo was running his hydro. The thing about being in a Buffalo is if you get torpedoed by a destroyer that has torpedoes with a 10.5 kilometer range, there's a very good chance that he's in range of your 10 kilometer rate. There it is. There's the radar. Yes. Well, why couldn't you have done that 10 minutes ago when you had 6 other teammates extremely anxious to shoot at this target for you? Because this is pretty much the dictionary definition of a day late and a dollar short. And I think we can kiss goodbye to the Vanguard as well. Yep, there it is. That's 364,000 damage done. And all because neither the Fletcher, the Enterprise, or the Buffalo had the faintest idea of what their ships were good for and how to play them. And, well, credit where credit's due, also because WoW CC57 has every idea of what his ship is good for and how to play it. Should we tell you who he is? Should we let the cat out of the bag? Should we out him on YouTube? Would you be surprised if I was to tell you that WoW's CC57 is the, up until now, anonymous test account of none other than the world's most toxic World of Warships community contributor, the Finnish gnome himself. This is Flamu. I mean, it's not that much of a secret. He streams using this account, so anybody who watches his Twitch live stream will be entirely aware of who this was right from the beginning of the video, assuming they were paying attention. And the reason that Flamu thought I might be interested in sharing the results of this battle with you is because that number at the top of the screen right there, 366,000 damage. Nobody has ever done that amount of damage in a Benham before. That is the world damage record. And I'll tell you now, because I'm sure some of you at least will be interested in knowing, 91,000 of that damage was from flooding alone. And so that was the artist formerly known as WoW CC57 setting the world damage record in the Tier 9 premium American destroyer, the USS Benham. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.